have to look at cash and securities as assets that can fulfill those obligations, and how do you make sure you have the right currency and the right collateral in the right place to meet those obligations efficiently.
Hello and welcome to the Bankers Masterclass series in association with Deutsche Bank, looking at how the security services business is changing. I'm Joy Macknight, Deputy Editor at The Banker, and I'm joined by Mike Clarke, Director, Product Management, Security Services at Deutsche Bank. In the second chapter of this video series, we're looking at some of the challenges clients face in optimizing their assets in today's regulatory environment. Mike, thanks for joining us again.
Thank you.
What are some of the challenges that clients are really facing in terms of managing their cash assets?
So I think I'd look at that in two dynamics to start with. The first of those is really the regulatory pressures, and second really is fragmentation. So from the regulatory side, we're seeing an increased demand on capital and the need to be able to place and mobilize cash as an asset across the globe as we move forward. But we're also seeing cash in and of itself is fragmented in the custody space across the globe. So you've got multiple accounts across multiple markets, and sometimes they're in the same currency that are being managed, and it's not really optimized. So you have to really look at how are you storing your cash, how are you linking your cash to your providers, but also how can you be using your assets that you're holding as security assets to potentially generate cash and cash liquidity for you during your day-to-day business management.
Okay, and specifically on the regulatory environment, what are the big regulations that are really coming to bear?
I'll use a couple of examples, and I think really the first one is on the Basel Accords. We're seeing a big drive for clients to really provision capital if they're using credit from a provider, as an example. So what that really means is an understanding of where you are using credit from your client, from your provider. How do you understand how much that is and prove to your regulator that you've got enough capital should that credit line not be there in the event of a squeeze? So that level of provisioning means that you really don't want to over-provision, so you need to be looking at how much cash you're using and how do you optimize that. And that's where you would look at shaping a solution that allows you to maybe have more of the same currency in the same location as you link to your provider. Secondly, what we're seeing is a drive through regulations such as EMIR, where more of the derivatives business needs to go through OTC clearing, so therefore collateral needs to be placed with central counterparties, again around the globe at the right point in time. And we have to look at cash and securities as assets that can fulfill those obligations, and how do you make sure you have the right currency and the right collateral in the right place to meet those obligations efficiently, so that you're not using high quality liquid assets that may be better served in one location to meet an obligation in another.
But regulations also give clients opportunities to better manage their cash assets. How can they do that?
Again, it comes down really to just looking at your end-to-end process and where cash needs to be, and how you build the right components into a solution that bring the best management of those assets to a client. So within the European region, it may be looking at saying, I want now to go to an individual provider who can give me direct access to the multiple markets in that region, but can give me a single cash account. So therefore there's intraday optimization of the euro within that particular setup that allows me to minimize the capital provisions that I need because I've got a consolidated single pool that I can use. But it's also around looking at components such as the collateral distribution we touched on in one of the other sessions, where you can use security assets to help you generate cash intraday and better reduce those obligations. And from a more global perspective, looking at some of the wider regions, how we look at FX solutions combined into the custody provision that allows us to change that currency and mobilize that currency more effectively to make sure it's in the right place at the right time to, again, minimize those obligations.
So the account operating models are changing. How is that happening?
Again, with the focus on investor protection, clients are looking at holding security assets in their own name at a central securities depository to be able to evidence that. And in and of itself, that also gives an opportunity, because you can look at that asset that's held in your own name. You can actually look at linking your own central bank money funds against the settlement of those assets, should you have access to central bank money, which is minimising your reliance on third-party providers. But it's also easy to identify your assets that are then available via the CSD or via an ICSD's collateral program that can be used and mobilised across the landscape to generate more cash assets. So there's a lot of advantages that you can look at there, but it's not the only solution that you have, and we always have to balance those advantages versus the obligations a client may take on in terms of reporting obligations or tax obligations of having their own account. And that's where smartly looking at how a client has their requirement, how they have their own internal challenges, how we can utilise the different models together allows us to look at, there's account operator model, there's segregated custody models, and that may be different solutions that bring different benefits to different clients. We're seeing a number of options, but account operator is certainly becoming much more prevalent and does give then further options in relation to cash.
Excellent. Thanks so much for your insights, Mike. In Chapter 3 of this masterclass series, in association with Deutsche Bank, we'll be looking at the data and digital from the client perspective.